Hello everyone, this is Gregory Schulz from Shumway Van Hansen here to talk to you today about a very interesting case that was just decided this week. As you have no doubt heard, New York City for some time had a regulation that banned the sale of soft drinks, sodas, more than 12 ounces in size by certain kinds of restaurants. The regulation exempted things like gas stations and bodegas, or milkshakes, for example, but generally it prohibited the sale of soft drinks larger than 12 ounces at restaurants, sports events, movie theaters, and similar establishments. So this regulation went all the way up on appeal to the New York State's highest court, which unlike most states in the United States itself is called the Court of Appeals. So New York, the highest court, is called the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals overturned the regulation. They did not overturn the regulation for the reason that many people think they did. The New York State Court of Appeals decision didn't have anything to do with sort of libertarian conceptions of the right to consume as much soda as one will or anything of that nature. Rather, it had to do with the difference between legislative and executive power. So if you remember back to civics class in high school, there are three branches of government. The legislative branch, which makes the laws, the executive branch, which implements them, and the judicial branch, which interprets the laws when they're challenging cases. So the executive branch is the one that has authority to make rules. Or excuse me, the legislative branch is the one that has the authority to make rules. The executive branch only implements them. So the so-called soda ban rule was enacted by an executive agency, one of the parts of the New York City Department of Health. So an executive agency is the one who enacted the soda ban. And the reason that the soda ban was overturned by the New York Court of Appeals was not because people are allowed to drink as much soda as they want, but rather because of who enacted it. So what the Supreme Court reasoned, or excuse me, what the Court of Appeals reasoned was that the soda ban was an attempt by an executive agency, the New York Department of Health, to exercise the legislative power. Here's one of the key cases that got relied on for this decision. It's an old case called Boreali in the New York system about smoking, which says, quote, "As an arm of the executive branch of government, an administrative agency may not, in the exercise of its rule-making authority, engage in broad-based public policy determinations." End of quote. So what that means in normal English is that the executive branch can't decide what's good or bad or what a good society looks like. Rather, all the executive agency has the authority to do is to implement laws. And what the New York Court of Appeals held was that when the Department of Health tried to ban sodas over 12 ounces, they were stepping onto a so-called clean slate, and they were regulating an event which they didn't have authority to regulate. What they were doing was they were saying, look, we just think this is a good idea. And they weighed economic and policy considerations when, in fact, it's only the job of the legislature to weigh economic and policy considerations. That is not the job of the executive. And that's why the New York soda ban was struck down. So it didn't have anything to do with individual liberty or personal privacy. Rather, it had everything to do with the authority of the executive versus the legislature. Now, that might seem really boring, but in reality, it's really important. The division of powers between the three branches of government is one of the key factors that helps the U.S. system stay in balance and make sure just laws are enacted and that they're properly executed and administered. So the real headline here is that this was an improper exercise of legislative authority by the executive branch.